Everyone, I call the May 9th, 2024 special school board meeting to order. It is 6:30 p.m. and we are in conference room C of the Fisher Administration Building at 12121 West North Avenue. Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Dr. Hoyk. Here. Ms. Willis. Dr. Worley. Here. Ms. Heimer-Rowland. Here. Mr. Meyer.
Here.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Here. And we have quorum this evening. Thank you all for being here with us. Our first item on our agenda is Strategic Goal 4, High Quality Staff. Action to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for Scotland Ecker as Chief Financial and Operations Officer, effective July 1st, 2024, for 229 days per year at an annual salary of $178,000. Mr. Meyer.
It is recommended that the school board approve the 2023-24 administrative contract for Scotland Ecker as Chief Financial and Operations Officer, effective July 1, 2024, for 229 days per year at an annual salary of $178,000, and I so move.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Heimer-Rowland. Ms. Zalazowski.
Good evening. I'm very pleased to share this recommendation with you this evening. As many of you know, our selection process for administrators in the district is very rigorous. We hosted two first round interviews with our team made up of business and operations office staff members and administrators, and then had a second round of interviews that included our director of finance, as well as our director of buildings and grounds, our division chiefs, and then Dr. Means, and a couple of our board members were also included in that round as well to meet Mr. Ecker. The references that I spoke with about Scott's work, not just in school districts in Wisconsin, but in school districts around the country through his consulting work, as well as when he served other school districts in the capacity of Chief Finance Officer, were tremendous. Through my conversations with Mr. Ecker as well, I'm really looking forward to working with him, and I'm happy to share this recommendation with you this evening.
Outstanding. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Ecker, you're welcome as well to come on up and introduce yourself, and if there's anything you'd like to share.
I guess, is this? Oh, okay. Thank you. I think I'll just lead by saying my name is Scotland, but I go by Scott. So feel free to call me Scott. I am just so excited to be here. I have lived in the Milwaukee area about 20 years. I have school-age children as well. And I think I'll be able to bring a lot to the district. I look forward to working with you as a team and meeting the rest of you. Eric and Liz had a chance to meet a couple weeks ago, and I really just can't wait to get started.
Anything from my board colleagues?
Welcome to the district. It was really great meeting you a couple weeks ago, and I agree with Sarah. You seem like you're going to be a great addition to the team, so welcome.
Thank you. I look forward to proving myself and moving us forward. My only question is, there must be Oz somewhere, because I heard somebody talking to start the meeting, and I was looking around and I don't see anybody.
It's like Oz.
Yes, it is.
It is like that.
It is a little bit like Oz. That's funny.
That is a new
Mr. Jamie Price is up in the ether. Guiding us through. It is wonderful to have you coming on board. We are at a critical time for our district as we think about both today and well into the future. I'm excited about the skill and talent that you'll bring and the expertise that you will have at your disposal and with all that you bring to our district. And I'm glad you're joining the team. So thank you so much. Ms. Summers, please call them.
Mr. Morris.
Yes.
Dr. Hoyk.
Yes.
Ms. Willis.
Yes.
Dr. Worley.
Yes.
Ms. Heimer-Rowland.
Yes.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes. Welcome to Wauwatosa.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Next up on our agenda is the annual board reorganization. I will turn this over to Dr. Means, who will guide us through the process.
Yes, so I have here ballots. The ballots this is the one time where the board's vote is not secret. I want to be very clear. These ballots are kept on file. And so if there's a request for these ballots, we do keep them on file. But you don't have to have an actual announcement of your individual vote. So I will pass these out momentarily. The process is one in which there needs to be a nomination for each of the positions. Once nominations are closed, then I pass out the ballot for each position. Yes,
So just to be clear for the community, the ballots are anonymous,
they're
but not
anonymous.
secret.
They're not secret, they're anonymous, and they are kept on file. Once the nominations do close, so thank you for that clarification, Mr. Meyer. Once the nominations are closed, then I pass out the ballots, and that's when you vote. There needs to be a majority of the board, or a majority needs to win for an officer to take those positions.
And I may have been looking at some things when you articulated this. You and Ms. Summers, I believe, are both going to review each of the ballots.
Yes. So there will be two people who will review the ballots. So we'll start by opening up nominations for the role of board president. Are there any nominations? Either you can nominate yourself or
We nominate them.
and you nominate, yes, you nominate.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's anonymous as
Yeah, that's
well.
anonymous as well.
Yes.
So excited here. My apologies. Thank you. You can get one second.
Yeah.
And if you want to just fold your nomination ballot and then Ms. Summers or I will pick them up. Thank you.
Exactly the same.
Oh. We have them all.
Ready for your.
Nominations have been received. We received 5 nominations for Dr. Jessup Enger, 1 nomination for Mr. Morris, and 1 abstention. So the question would be, do you both, Mr. Morris, do you accept the nomination? No. Okay. Dr. Jessup Enger, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
That means we have 1 candidate for the role of board president. We will now pass out the ballots for board president.
Say no to see what happens.
You asked me first, sorry.
Right.
So you asked me first. It's like roulette.
Ballots have been received for the selection of board president, and on a 6-1 vote, Dr. Jessup Anger has been selected as board president for the upcoming school year. Congratulations.
Point of order.
Yes,
How could it be 6-1?
there was one abstention.
Oh, okay.
Yes. We will now take nominations for board vice presidents.
Would make this fun, Eric. You ever seen that, like that corporate like Cahoots where they do the games?
Oh, yeah.
Or like, 'cause you can kind of be anonymous on that. Like, so that everybody on, like, there can see it happening live.
They do that in the middle school, maybe even elementary, but my daughter loves it. She said, we did.
Like, once a quarter.
Fine.
It's a fun word to say.
You play a drink.
What is it? Can you say it one more time?
It's a drink. ELOOK. Oh, it's not cat. I just say things are blue.
So through our voting process, two board members were nominated for the role of vice president, Dr. Jenny Hoy and Dr. Lynn Worley. Dr. Worley, do you accept the nomination for board vice president?
No.
Dr. Hoy, do you accept the nomination for vice president?
Yes.
Okay. We will now pass out the ballots for the role of board vice president.
I have to say, I really like the balance.
Very pretty.
Colorful. I like the journal, so I know exactly where to. I know what to do.
It'll change next year. We'll have official from the voting commission where you have to have little bubbles.
I'm not gonna share.
I punched a hole through mine. Is that not the label?
Yeah. Many choices, happy days.
Ooh. Well, the next one is gonna have all different ones. We're gonna be like, okay.
A 7-0 vote, Dr. Jenny Hoy was elected as board vice president. Congratulations. We are now transitioning to seeking nominations for the role of treasurer, board treasurer. We'll pass out the nomination ballots now.
Oh, now then. Wait, it's like. So I take them earlier in the school year. But they're all different kinds. The rest of the school takes them after. Like, no chill out. I'm only. You're just asking people to donate.
There were two nominations submitted for the role of board treasurer. Ms. Heimer Rollin, you were nominated along with Mr. Meyer. Mr. Meyer, do you accept the nomination to be considered a candidate for the board treasurer?
No.
Ms. Heimer Rollin, do you accept the nomination? Okay. We will now pass out the ballots for the role of treasurer.
Second, no set of them.
Need to nominate her votes today.
You're also an like, there's some very close race journalism.
Based on a 7-0 vote, Ms. Heimer Rollin, congratulations, you were elected board treasurer. The last officer role that we do need to have election for is for the role of board clerk. So we'll pass out those nominations right now.
What is?
So good.
Yeah.
There were two nominations submitted for the role of board clerk. The nominations were with Mr. Mike Meyer and Dr. Worley. Mr. Meyer, do you accept the nomination to serve as board clerk?
Yes.
Dr. Worley, do you accept the nomination to serve as board clerk?
Yes.
Okay, we will now pass out the ballots. On a 5-2 vote, Mr. Meyer has been selected as board clerk. Congratulations, Mr. Meyer. That concludes the officer selection process. Dr. Jessepinger.
Thank you very much, Dr. Means. In addition to the officer positions, we have several committee responsibilities and a CISA representative responsibility that we need to appoint to this evening. No one is pre-slotted into these, and so we talked a little bit in in-service a few weeks ago as a board about areas of interest. Wanted to kind of navigate this process in a collegial manner. If anyone,
I'm sorry, can we have a motion to elect these officers?
yes.
It is recommended that the following persons be elected officers of the Wauwatosa School Board in accordance with policy 0150 for a term beginning tonight and ending in May 2025, and I so move. President, President, Dr. Jessup Anger, Vice President, Dr. Jenny Hoig, Treasurer, Ms. Heimer Rolland, and Clerk, Dr. Worley. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Meyer. And it is recommended that the superintendent be appointed to act as secretary to the board, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, and thank you. Any board comments or seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoig?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Rolland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anger?
Yes. Congratulations to all the new officers. Next up is action to appoint our CISA representative. Ms. Willis, you've served in this role this last year. Can you just briefly for the community so they understand, and I know the board is no, but briefly share what the CISA representative is and why we.
Sure. So about various we get together once a year. We only meet once a month, discuss the work that's.
And would you be interested in continuing on this role going forward? Okay. Would anyone else like to be considered for this role? Seeing none? May I? Yes?
It is recommended that the school board appoint Ms. Willis as CISA representative, and I so move.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Any words or reflections on your time or?
No, I mean, I look forward to continue. Like I shared before, it's been great to collaborate with other board members.
Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoig?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yeah.
Dr. Worley? Yes. Ms. Heimer Rolland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anger?
Yes. Congratulations and thank you for serving in this role. Next is action to appoint policy committee members. Want to share a little bit about anybody who'd like to throw their hat in the ring to be on policy committee? Mr. Bruce.
I'm willing on either of the ones I've been serving on, or both.
Thank you. You two are comfortable with continuing on. You've been doing great work. A lot of work. And I presume it will slow down a little bit too.
We'll slow down a little bit. Not just yet, but soon.
Soon, yes.
By Christmas.
Ms. Willis, can you read this one?
It is recommended that the school board appoint Dr. Lynn Worley and Philip Morris as policy committee members, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
I'll give that to Ms. Heimer Rolland. Any words before we vote? I would say thank you. Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Rolland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes. And you were both appointed. Thank you. Next is action to appoint legislative advocacy committee members. Is this one that anybody is continuing to be interested in serving?
I am so interested in continuing. I want to see it. It's going to be really important work with this next annual budget.
I'm interested as well.
Seeing no others. Lynn, could you read this one?
It is recommended that the school board appoint Jessica Willis and Jenny Hoig, as legislative advocacy committee members, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Morris has it.
See, isn't it fun when we don't know and we have to be initiative and
Yeah, I haven't, by the way, this whole evening, I have no idea what's going to.
yeah.
Shows very eagerness in the.
No, I mean for the seconds, right?
Yeah.
It's everything. Yes, it's always fun.
We entertain ourselves.
Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Rolland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes, and congratulations to the two of you, and thank you for serving on the Legislative Advocacy Committee this coming year. Next up is Finance and Resource Committee members. Who would be willing and able and interested in serving on the Finance and Resource Committee? Generally, as treasurer, Ms. Hammer Rolland is serving on that. Ms. Worley, Dr. Worley, you said you'd be willing. Mr. Meyer, this is one that you would have interested and be willing to serve on?
I'll pass, I think, on this. No, thank you. If there are others interested, is that correct?
I think I won't speak for her. Dr. Worley?
I'm willing. If there is a spot, because the same thing as last year, we don't.
You're on policy.
But you're also clerking, so.
Well, let's just come over and sign stuff and be sure I know what I'm signing.
Interesting.
And foot the tax levy document. Is there no one else?
Everyone else will.
I understand. I will do it if it's the will of the board. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Morris, can you read this one out with?
It is recommended that the school board appoint Mr. Michael Meyer and Ms. Liz Hammer-Rolland as Finance and Resource Committee members, and I so move.
I have a second?
Second.
Finding.
Can we have a replay to see?
Maybe a second?
Second.
I think it was Dr. Willis.
This is where it paused.
I think she really asked, I did, ask Mr. Meyer,
No.
and she wanted to get that one.
No,
Yes.
ask the great Oz who was first.
Mr. Price, do you have an accounting on who was second?
Replay maybe?
The great Oz.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Well, Mr. Price, well played.
I'm gonna give it to Dr.
I was so
Willis.
focused on the technology aspect of it that I wasn't listening to the
Well played.
nominations. I'm sorry.
Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Rolland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes, thank you and congratulations to both of you serving on that committee. Next is action to appoint ex officio member to the Curriculum Council. This is one that I had shared earlier that I'd be willing to do. I'm really interested in. I also recognize that others may be that as well, and so would certainly entertain other.
Dr. Jessmanger, and make a suggestion if there are multiple people who are interested. You could approach this assignment the same way that you do with this motion hearing panel and have someone serve one semester and the other, so then it's just not one person. So that's another option if you have multiple interest points. Just a suggestion.
Love that idea.
I expressed interest before, but I think I'll be content on the Legislative Advocacy Committee and the CISA Board. But thank you.
If at any point you would like to, let me know and we can find a way to share that.
Thank you.
So who do we have?
Me. Mr. Meyer.
But isn't the board president already ex officio all committees?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Technically, yeah. So you could have another person fill in for you when you're not there if you wish.
It's true. Yeah. Would you be willing to serve that one?
I would.
So just not to throw a wrench in the works, but then is the board's understanding that Eric would be primary, and if he couldn't be there, then we'd have somebody who, is that good? Are you good with that?
Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Just trying to help. Want me to read the motion, sir? Okay. It is recommended that the school board appoint Jessica Willis as ex officio member to the Curriculum Council, and I so move.
There's a second.
Second.
Ms. Sowers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoy,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Binger.
Yes. And thank you, Ms. Willis, for playing this role. Next one is a new subcommittee that we're looking at beginning, and I want to ask Dr. Worley to read this out, and then after there's a second, share a little bit about where this is coming from.
Yeah.
It is recommended that the school board create a net zero exploration task force or committee as a subcommittee to the Finance and Resource Committee, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. We have an initial motion and a second, and Dr. Worley, can you?
Yeah, I'll
May
keep it.
I ask a question?
If you're okay, I'm gonna have her explain it and then we'll come to you.
Oh, yeah, I want to know, that's my question. What's this, how does this work as a subcommittee of the Finance Committee and all that stuff? Okay.
So this comes from, I think, an interest that's been in the district among a number of residents and parents and others to figure out if there is a good and financially sound set of opportunities to look as our buildings that exist, and as we do them, to consider the potential of energy sources and energy use that is not using fossil fuels that we expect will be getting more expensive. They already are going up. There is also, there's so many pieces of this. There's also the possibility in the long run, also looking at how it fits with the curriculum. But for right now, the idea would be to ask this group, and there are a number of people in the community who carry this expertise, to assess what our buildings are like. It's not merely just like saying, well, let's put solar panels on. There's so many different choices out there right now. This would be looking at what each building is using in terms of resources. Are there ways that could be improved? What would that look like? I'd also say that this is a really important time to be thinking about this, partly because there are quite a few programs out there to support it. So from a financially feasible standpoint right now and in the next couple of years, it will be probably, that's part of what they look at, probably feasible. In particular, some of you may be familiar that the Inflation Reduction Act carries quite a lot of funding for businesses, especially nonprofits and schools and even personal homeowners, to explore ways to tighten up their energy use, everything from increasing the way the building is retaining heat or retaining coolness, to putting other types of technology in or on that building or near that building to produce energy. And my thought on this is we should at least find out whether this is something that we could be more both energy efficient and financially efficient in the coming years. So that's why I've asked for this in discussions. It's felt like it would fit well in the finance committee because the finance committee is looking at buildings, at facilities. And we also are very lucky to have Kevin LaFontaine in that on that committee and also heading up the facilities. And he's had experience in Waukesha School District working on this as well and has had some interest in that. We also may or may not know that the city of Wauwatosa has been working on this for a few years, and they bring a lot of experience, and they are very interested in being there as a resource for the school. So it just seems like the right time financially in terms of the facility explorations we're doing right now to at least figure out, and that would be the point of this group. It would be temporary. It would bring the experts together to help us figure out whether we should be making decisions on this. So it does not commit us to this. It gives us the opportunity to learn and consider. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Mr. Meyer.
So is this meant to be staffed by one of the two board members of the finance committee, or is this intended to be a side committee with different membership? If it's a side committee with different membership, then I would offer a friendly amendment to change it from as a subcommittee to as an adjunct committee of the finance committee.
You're asking whether I'm not sure I understand the differences.
Okay. So to be a subcommittee, your subcommittee membership has to be from the committee itself.
So you're thinking there might be a board member that's a liaison rather than necessarily someone who's sitting on the finance committee?
So you'd have a third board member. Then I would suggest we call it an adjunct or committee.
We can call it whatever we
well,
would
but
like.
If you want it to be attached to the finance committee to have it have some formal right to speak to the finance. I'm just trying to be process.
That's fine. I'm open to however, if this is discussion, however we want to put this forward and whatever we want to call it. It's more a question of connecting it there, partly because of staffing in the district.
Right.
Makes sense to put it under there and because of what the finance committee covers.
So this has to do with the question of how do we get quorum and who has to be there for it to be a real meeting and that kind of stuff. And
absolutely, that's fine.
I'm thinking we have more flexibility if it's an adjunct committee.
I'm open.
But I'm not stuck on it either way.
I'm open to however we do it.
I'm curious. So what was your thought about how it would operate? Would it just be like at your normal finance committee meetings, or I don't know, or would you serve?
I think the idea would be to not make it last a really long time. From what the folks who have done this work have explained to me, as I've been kind of investigating what could we do and what are the options, is that there are sort of layers, there's a few layers of tasks. Like first, it's like looking at all what we are doing. Then it's considering several environmental factors and building factors. So I don't know that the work would not have to be done at the finance committee. I mean, I think I would defer that to our finance committee members, how they'd like to set this up as well. What kind of interest they have. It could be reporting when there's something to report. I think Dr. Means and I have talked about the structure, and I think he's seen that this is the way to put it.
Yes, and I think the friendly amendment would be appropriate if you want to call it an ad hoc committee, because the ad hoc is, it doesn't mean that it's a standing committee. I think Dr. Worley's idea, and I concur with it 100%, that the best place for the reporting out of that ad hoc committee would be at the Finance and Resource Committee. And so if the friendly amendment is accepted by the board, that makes a lot of sense. But I think the reporting structure would be at the Finance and Resource Committee, because Mr. LaFontaine, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, he typically provides reports at that level, and it just makes the most sense for the reporting to go there.
question around the committee. I'm trying to have a better understanding of the goals of the ad hoc committee in this instance. Is this independent solely for the school district, or is this in collaboration with other environmental or sustainability groups within Wauwatosa?
I would hope that it would be in conjunction with other groups. I think as Dr. Worley stated, there is a group already convened through the city of Wauwatosa. There are experts. I'll go as far as saying there are experts in our community that we have not tapped into to date. And those experts in our community have, as Dr. Worley cited earlier, they have connections to universities and other grant opportunities. So I think our ad hoc committee has the ability to bring people together within the city of Wauwatosa.
Second question on that is, so in collaboration with these other groups on there, are we going to have outcomes that benefit the district or benefiting the city as a whole? Whereas our data, whatever we find and learn here from the district, does lesser benefit for the information we learn from it, the insights and the kind of information that we learn that we are less sustainable and less close to and further away from the net zero goal by 2050 or 2030, whatever the date is. I just want to make sure that we don't end up in something where, based on the information that comes out, that we are put in a position where the district doesn't do this because we learn these things. It affects the city as a whole because they can't gain some kind of funding, or vice versa.
It's not meant to be joint with the city.
Okay.
The city is done a lot more than we have already. They have offered to provide guidance. There's a sustainability committee. There may be some of the same people if we decide to ask them to serve, but not like city people. But they're definitely people in the city, both on staff and people in the community who are helping the city that have the expertise. But I wasn't envisioning this. I was envisioning this as a school district ad hoc committee to look at the school district buildings and energy use and options to inform us as a board if whether or not there is something we should be considering here. Does that clarify what you're asking?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. So I haven't had time to really think about this, but I'm way more comfortable with adjunct than ad hoc. Ad hoc, we have a specific policy statement about ad hoc committees, so I'm not quite sure what we're doing. But if we haven't structured this the way we desire, we can always change it later. So I don't think it's a big deal so much tonight. But I'll just tell you what my preference is. Somehow, subcommittee, I suspect the two finance committee people are going to be pretty busy already. And there's other people on the board with maybe more interest in the heavy emphasis on this. And ad hoc, I mean, energy has been a problem since 1973. So, and the oil embargo of my final years in high school, some 50 years ago. So it's not going away. It's not ad hoc. It's forever with us. So, that's it.
So the friendly amendment would change the initial motion to read, it is recommended that the school board create a net zero exploration task force / committee as an adjunct of the finance and resource committee, and I so move. Dr. Worley, are you comfortable with that friendly amendment?
I am fine with that.
Okay. Any other board comments or questions? If not, I'll have Ms. Summers call the roll. Ms. Summers?
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyk? Yes. Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Heimer-Rolland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup-Inger?
Yes. And Dr. Worley, thank you for bringing this forward. Next, we are moving into number 4 on our agenda, review of the community survey results. Dr. Meads.
Yes, and I think we're going to bring in virtually our presenters from School Perceptions. I think we may need some technical assistance to allow them to link in. So, Mr. Price, I think
they're all present in the meeting already, and one of them just shared their screen.
Present been sharing. Whenever you're ready, I am too.
Just for the board's sake, to review and for the community's sake, the Board of Education met with representatives from school perceptions in February during your board retreat. And it was at that time where the concept of a community-wide survey was discussed. The board expressed the need for accurate data to get a sense of what the community would support, was expressed during that retreat. And as a result of the feedback provided by the board, the survey was disseminated. I don't want to steal any of the major talking points and primary points from school perception, so I will just turn it over now to our colleagues, Rob and Bill from school perceptions, who will give you a review of the community survey that was distributed this late spring, or excuse me, late winter, early spring here in Wauwatosa. So Rob, Bill, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, my name is Rob. Bill is somewhere in Wisconsin tonight. I don't really know where. And I appreciate your flexibility in presenting virtually. My brother returned home from a deployment yesterday, so I'm looking forward to hanging out with him over the next few days. So the virtual option was much appreciated. My name is Rob. I was one of the folks that was with you in February for your board retreat on that Saturday morning. So hopefully my face doesn't look too unfamiliar, but I'll be the one to go through your report with you this evening, and certainly take some time for questions at the end. So hopefully you're seeing a screen that has your name up on it. Is that right? Is that readable for you?
Yes.
Okay. So with that being said, there are 4 color codes to our slides that I want to take you through. We will spend the least amount of time tonight on our blue slides. That is background information. That is the exact content that was in your survey. And I know you're all intimately familiar with that at this point. So there's nothing new there. There's either screenshots or we retyped exactly what was in your survey. We'll begin with the yellow slides. Those are your demographic information. We will spend the most time tonight on the green slides. That's your result and analysis. And then certainly throughout the survey, and especially at the end, I'll leave some time for wrap up and questions as well. I won't spend too much time on this slide. Basically, the point here is that this isn't our first rodeo. This is year number 23 of doing these type of surveys. We've done over 10,000 of them for staff, parent, student, and community surveys, all in the name of school improvement. And you're one of many. We've helped more than 900 districts across the nation navigate the strategic planning and that potential pre-referendum planning process. As you know, your survey closed up about a month ago, and you had an outstanding response rate. In fact, relative to your survey that we did for you about 6 years ago now, your response rate is, or total number of responses rather, is 45% higher than what it was that in 2018 for a 22% response rate. Now, for context, our average response rate in any given community is approximately 15 to 17%. So you're above average there. With that response rate varying from 15 to 17%, our accuracy rate is approximately 94 to 95% correct. Now, I want to pause a moment there and define what accuracy means in our world. If the data is telling us that a referendum that you're testing is going to pass, and you take that to ballot, and on election day it passes, that is a success in our world. That is an accurate prediction. But the flip side of that is also true. If the data is telling us that a referendum is going to fail, and while it doesn't happen all that often, there are times where a district will take that plan to ballot anyhow, and it fails, that is still a success in our world, because that is an accurate prediction. So we are in the business of being a conduit for your taxpayers. We are in the business of giving you the best data we can so that you know if you were to take something to ballot, would it or would it not be supported by the voters in your community? And you have a response rate that is above what we would feel comfortable giving an accurate prediction for you to here. The benefit of living in a larger community is that your statistical margin of error also gets tighter and tighter. So rounding here, I guess, as we go on, if you could just bear in mind maybe plus or minus about 1.5%, I will revisit that number. But that is a function of the folks who took your survey and the size of your community here. Who took your survey? You have what I would expect to see here, what I would hope to see here. It's a bit of a broken bell curve. Your 35 to 54 age groups are very well represented. That makes sense. A lot of your staff and a lot of your parents are going to be captured in those 2 age ranges. The celebration here is that you got really good opinions from your 65 plus. Most likely they are not going to be employed by you and are past that parenting age. So whatever you did to get the word out, even for folks who may not have kids or are employed by you, it worked. So whatever buzz you were able to create around town that this survey was out, you got really good representation from your 65 plus, which is good because they will be there on election day and they will let you know what they think. So that is a success as well in terms of your demographics. We then asked, is your primary residence within the school district? As we move forward, many of our analyses are going to focus on the 91% of folks that said, yes, I live there. There are folks that could get the survey that don't live there. Why? Well, staff are under no requirement to live within the district's boundaries. They get the survey, they take the survey. They may have a very influential voice, but that influence is capped because they cannot control an election within your school district boundaries. Likewise, with parents who have kiddos that open enroll into the district, they get the survey, but by definition of open enrolling into the district, they don't live there. So while they get the survey, we're going to focus on that 91% of folks that are able to control an election or a referendum within the Wauwatosa School District, and we will filter those other folks out. Next up, we have two questions that we'll use side by side. On many of the analyses moving forward, we're going to focus on how staff are feeling. We will focus on how parents are feeling. And then the the non-parents, non-staff. And you have a good chunk of each group here for us to be able to disaggregate that data. So these are the questions that get us to those results. And I'll talk a little bit more about why we do that in just a few minutes. The last bit of your demographics section was, how do you like to receive information from the school or district? And it was a select all that apply, so it purposely doesn't add up to 100% here. But it's a carefully worded question. It doesn't say how do you receive, because you could be communicating with me in a way that I don't want you to. You're doing X, but I really want you to do Y. That's how I want to learn about what's going on. And we specifically zoomed in here on non-parents, non-staff, and your parents. So for your non-parents, non-staff represented here in the purple bars, they really want to learn about what's going on in the Wauwatosa School District via the newsletters that you send out. That is the primary way they're learning about you and want to learn about you. And then I would say in terms of kind of the tier 2 level here, the website, they're going to the website. And then whatever opportunity, whether you have an opt-in system or that could be a possibility in the future, if non-parents, non-staff could receive emails, based on this data, they would read them. Your parents are a bit more balanced. Certainly emails, that's not unlike every other district. Around 9 and 10 want to receive emails from you. The website as well, the newsletters, and then to what extent you can communicate with parents for phone notifications, that will also collect some eyes as well. Next up, as I mentioned, we're going to go into some of the blue slides. These are the slides that will not be new to you because this is exactly what was captured in your survey itself. So talking a little bit about what the financial challenges in the Wauwatosa School District were. If voters were to support a referendum, what is it that you would do with that money? And should I be more curious about learning more about what a referendum is or how you would use that money? We made sure that there was a website that people could go to learn more about it. And then we asked the question. Based on what we crafted back with you in February, the question read, would you support a referendum that provides $21 million each year for 5 years? And here we're zooming in on your staff, specifically who are residents within the district, and about 6 in 10 are supportive of that plan. Just under 30%, 29% specifically, are supportive of this operational referendum plan as described. Your parents, very similar support. 61% are supportive of the operational referendum as described. 27% said no. And your non-parents, non-staff, a little over 1/3 of your non-parents, non-staff said yes. Over majority, 52% specifically, said no. Now, why do we do it this way? Just backing up a couple of slides, here in the Navy for your staff, they are remarkably influential people in your community. They probably more so than you as board members, they're the ones that are going to get stopped in the dairy aisle of the grocery store or at the gas station. And they are going to be asked, hey, I got this survey, what's going on at school? So we absolutely want to know what they think. At the end of the day, though, while they're remarkably influential, proportional in the community, there's just not that many of them. About 1% of the community is going to be employed by you. So you got kind of the scales here. Very influential, not that many. Your parents are kind of in the middle. They make up about a quarter of your community, which leaves, by process of elimination, about 3/4 of your community is captured on this slide right here. So whenever I look at data, if I see purple bars or I see the label non-parents, non-staff, I always put my eyes there first because that represents the bulk of your community. So knowing that those groups are different sizes, then we want to take that support and weight it by how big those groups are. So if your parents are about a quarter of the community, they're supportive at 61%. Your non-parents, non-staff, 75% of your community came in at 36%. What this slide is telling us right here is if you as board members were to put this question on the ballot today on May 9th, a majority of your community would not support the referendum, the operational referendum as described. More specifically, it would be expected to accrue about 42% support. The next section said, if you don't support the referendum, in which areas do you want us to cut? So this was a yes, no question. So behind the scenes, just to put some numbers behind this, if I said, yes, I want you to cut this thing, cut this area, it was weighted as a 10. If I said, no, don't cut this area, it was weighted as a 1, which means the median of that data set is 5.5. So any number that is above 5.5, that group is saying, yes, I want you to cut this area. If it's below 5.5, that group is saying, no, I don't want you to cut this area. Hopefully to read a little bit better, any number that is above 5.5, I bolded here and put up at the top, and this data happens to be organized by non-parents, non-staff, only again because they're the largest chunk of your community. So what your non-parents, non-staff are saying here is if you need to pursue cuts, they want you to pursue cuts in 2 areas, administration and or district level staff, and by closing 1 or more schools. Your parents, the one number for them that was above 5.5 was support for cutting administration and or district level staff. Your staff, they were supportive of cutting in 2 areas, same theme, cutting administration and or district level staff, and closing 1 or more schools was also north of 5.5 for your staff. The rest of the numbers here fell below 5.5. So regardless of the group, regardless of the item, the rest of these were your community saying, no, I don't want you to cut this thing. So just for the sake of transparency, at the bottom, your community is telling you, we don't want you to cut those elementary school specials. We don't want you to reduce middle or high school athletics and fine arts offerings. And we don't want you to reduce middle school course offerings and only teach those required by state law. As you know, there were several other projects that were tested along with that operational referendum as sort of an expansion thereof. So the first one was transportation. Again, we're in a blue slide here, so this is word for word what was in your survey. And the question read, would you support expanding the referendum by $1 million for each of the next 5 years to pay for transportation services? About 1/4 of your staff residents were supportive, 6 in 10 were not. Parents, about 1/3 were supportive, over half were not for transportation. And for your non-parents, non-staff, a little under 1/4 were supportive of this plan. About 2/3 exactly, were not supportive of you expanding a referendum by $1 million to pay for transportation services. Same kind of idea here. If we weight that support, only about 1/4 of the community would be supportive of this transportation option if this were to be on a ballot today. Next up was employee compensation. This one read, would you support expanding that $21 million per year referendum by $2 million for each of the next 5 years to pay employees more competitively? Staff residents were supportive, 8 in 10. 13% said no. Parents, very similar. About 3/4 said yes, 16% said no. And non-parents, non-staff, you also breached majority support at 53% said yes, 37% said no. So when we weight that, this was actually approximately 59%. But bear in mind the way the question was worded. Would you support expanding the referendum by $2 million to pay for this? And then finally, the third of the 3 extra projects tested, curriculum updates. would you support expanding the referendum by $1 million for each of the next 5 years to update curriculum and courses? Your residents who are staff, 45% said yes. 61% of your parents said yes. An under majority for your non-parents, non-staff said yes to this plan. About 4 in 10 said yes. So when you weight this, it is below majority. 45% would be supportive of this question. The next section of your survey was related to school attendance boundaries. Back to a blue slide here. This is word for word what was in your survey about balancing the elementary school specifically and noting that the district has not done this since 1996. What did we learn? The question read, should the district adjust school attendance boundaries? A little over 6 in 10, 62% specifically said yes, adjust. Very few, relatively speaking, under 1 in 10 said no, and 30% said not sure or need more information. I think that's probably a logical result here. That's not an unexpected result. I think there's a lot of, well, which attendance boundaries? My school, the school across town. So I'm not necessarily surprised here to see people being unsure, because I think there's some follow-up questions about which schools and how might be affected by this change. When we break that up into our now familiar subgroups, you do breach majority for yes, no matter the subgroup. So 65%, 55%, and 68% respectively for your staff, your parents, and your non-parents, non-staff are supportive of you adjusting school attendance boundaries. Very similar, just as I skip between these two slides here, you'll see the data stays pretty much the same no matter how we divide it. Very few are saying no, 5%, 10%, and 7% respectively for your staff, your parents, and your non-parents, non-staff. And you remain pretty steady for those folks that have some more questions. You're not sure, need more information, hovers between about 1/4 and 1/3 of your survey respondents. Open enrollment. There was a graph in here showing what proportion, what percent of your students were open enrolled in. Currently, it's about 16%. And then asked for the advice. What advice would you give the Wauwatosa School District regarding open enrollment? A little under 1/4 said maintain the current open enrollment level. 57%, so adding those two middle columns together, are in favor of reducing. The difference there is the extent to which you reduce. So my takeaway here is you breach majority from your community who wants you to reduce open enrollment levels. So it would be the next step to decide at what point do you reduce those open enrollment levels. 18% said slightly reduce. 39% said significantly reduce open enrollment. That was the plurality. 1 in 5 said I'm not sure, need more information. When we break that up, the data stays very similar. You breach majority here when you add together those two middle columns. So you're at about 1/4 for any given subgroup for those who want to maintain. Again, not to sound like a broken record, but when you add the two middle columns together, you're getting a favorable result in terms of this case for reducing open enrollment. But the extent to which the question would follow up then is, to what extent do we reduce open enrollment? And you're not sure or don't know or need more information stayed fairly similar. Finally, then the overall satisfaction. So the scale changed a little bit here. We're on a scale of 1 to 4. So 1 being poor, 2 being fair, 3 being good, 4 being great. So the perfect score is 4.00. The worst score is 1.00, which means the median of that data set is 2.5. So whenever I look at this data, that's the first thing I do is I eyeball these 12 numbers and I say, are there any particular items or are there any particular subgroups that are above or below 2.5, since that is the median? The 4 metrics on which your survey respondents were evaluating you were A, delivering a high quality education, B, keeping the public informed, C, managing funds appropriately, and D, building pride in the community. So when I do that, there are a couple that I see, the majority of them are north of 2.5. In fact, all 3 subgroups are above the median in terms of building pride in the community, and all 3 subgroups are above the median in terms of the extent to which they believe you're delivering a high quality education. Keeping the public informed was very similar. It's just slightly below the median for non-parents, non-staff at a score of 2.43 on a 1 to 4 scale. And then the item that is the lowest among the 4 is managing funds appropriately. That happens to be below 2.5, regardless of whether it's staff, parents, or non-parents, non-staff. Same data, same questions. Now I'm just analyzing it from a slightly different angle. So the question read the same. How is the district doing in each of the following areas? What this slide is saying is what percentage of all our survey respondents are saying we're doing a great or a good job on this particular metric? What is that average? Same scale, 1 to 4, and then a comparison score. So let me talk a little bit about these in turn. First, well, I guess it's the second column here. After the item, the percentage of folks that are saying you're doing great or good. 3 of them are above majority, and 1 of them is getting close to 3/4 that are saying you're doing good or great. That particular one is delivering a high quality education. The other 2 that are above majority are keeping the public informed and building pride in the community. But as you can see here, of the 4, the lowest is managing funds appropriately. Similar story in terms of the average. When you pool all residents together, what's above or below that 2.5 median? Same. The 3 that are above are delivering a high quality education, keeping the public informed and building pride in the community. The one that is below is how the district is managing funds and whether they're managing funds appropriately. The final column then, just to give you some extent to, based on our comparison school, which by the way, is among the biggest districts in Wisconsin over the past 5 years. So we're not necessarily comparing you to very rural districts in northern Wisconsin. This is the 10% of the largest school districts in Wisconsin over the past 5 years for which we have done surveys. How do you stack up? How do their scores relate to your scores? Some of them are close. Some of them are a little bit further away. So you're 1,800s, about 2/10 of a point away from the average of delivering a high quality education. About a quarter of a point away from your comparison pool in terms of keeping the public informed. And about a quarter of a point away, exactly a quarter of a point away from building pride in the community. But as you can see, the one that sticks out a little bit here is managing funds appropriately. Of the comparisons, that is the one that is furthest away from the comparison pool. Finally, then, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district to a friend or family member? Your overall average is 6.47. Among your comparison pool, it's a score of 7.26. So what I take away from your score here is just eyeballing this, you can see that there are more folks in the greens than there are in the reds down below. So certainly people are more likely to recommend you than they are not. And that's what I want to see here. The other way to look at this data, well, there's a couple of ways to look at this data. One of the other ways that I like to look at this data is just by doing some simple math here, and I'll start up at the top. Over 1 in 10, 14% of your survey respondents specifically are giving you a perfect score. If you take 14 and you add in 10, you're at 24%. Add in another 19, you're at 43%. And the reason I call that out, so you're not that far away from majority here, that 50% threshold. The reason 8 to 10 is important is because the research behind this question suggests that those folks that score themselves as an 8, 9, and 10 act as ambassadors on the district's behalf, which means they will go out and talk well about the district without you having to do anything. They are the ones that will strike up the conversation with friends or family members or folks who don't have their kids enrolled in Wauwatosa or don't live in Wauwatosa, and they will talk about the positive things that are happening there. If you added another 14%, you breach majority, that brings you to 57%, I believe. So you're north of majority and you've only reached 7. And to be totally frank, that is not all that common, especially following 2020, 2021. There are times I'm giving this report and I don't reach majority until I reach a score of 4 or 3. So despite all the data that you heard, I think one celebration here is that you do have over 4 in 10 people that are acting ambassadors on your behalf. And you certainly have at that 14%, I think I was at 57%. So I added another 8. I'm at 65%. So right around 2/3 of your survey respondents have a positive association, have a positive connotation of what Wauwatosa's school district is doing. So in sum, what did we learn? 1, if held today, the 5-year, $21 million operational referendum as proposed would not be supported. B, of the other operational funding items tested, only additional employee compensation receives majority support. C, a majority of respondents believes the district should adjust attendance boundaries. And D, a majority of respondents believes the district should either slightly or significantly reduce open enrollment. let me pause here. I'm going to take a swig of my water, but by all means, if you have any questions, I absolutely want to take them now.
So this is Mike Meyer. My question is conceptually this. This survey is questions against a series of concepts. It is not a specific plan that we're asking, where we're asking what the community thinks. So I just caution that and say, you know, if we were down into the details of the data and we're brilliant survey analysts, like I'm sure you are, if you start to look at how you would cobble together a coalition to get to 50% yes, is there some way to look at this data to try to figure out what that would be?
Well, let me first say that we don't do that work very carefully. So we can't be in the business of letting you know how to persuade people to pass a referendum. There are folks that are very good at that. We are not those folks. We want to be the voice of your taxpayers to tell people, to tell you as district leaders, whether or not your taxpayers, as described, would support this survey. So how to get to 50%, that is not something I can tell you to do.
I'm sorry. I wasn't talking about persuading people. I'm talking about getting down to the subcells and things to find, not to persuade 50%, but to find 50%. And okay, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
So Wauwatosa, one of the things that I think is unique about Wauwatosa is the high voter turnout that we have here. I just was doing some really quick math, which is going to be plus or minus some percentage. But it looks like almost everybody who's an adult in Wauwatosa is a registered voter. And in like our last presidential election, of 35,000 registered voters, 32,000 voted. So we have a really high rate of voting. So I know that you were saying that 22% is really good for a survey, and we should feel really sure about that because, you know, sure with these results because it's representative, but I just don't feel like most communities are also like Wauwatosa and the percent of people who actually show up to vote when it is time to actually vote. And I wonder if there's like there has to probably be a response bias, right? Of the 22% of people who took this, there's a reason they took this survey. There's a reason they took the time to do this. How do you account for response bias when you have a community that's the size of ours, knowing that, you know, we have around 50,000 people who live here and only 5,000 people took the survey?
That's the same, I guess it's the same reason why Pew doesn't need to survey the whole nation to get something. I think what we have here will tell you with enough extrapolation power to tell you how the broader community will feel, regardless of regardless of the response rate here being at 22%. I think you should feel strongly about that. In terms of who takes the survey, some of that's going to be a wash because the people that are very supportive will take your survey. The people that are very excited to tell you no, they do not want to raise their property taxes, are going to be very motivated to take a survey. And what we have found is, as we work in other districts, there are schools that will choose to do their survey non-anonymously, which we don't recommend, but they do it. And what we can find is those that take our survey and those that vote, the middle of that Venn diagram is really quite wide. So you don't need everybody, obviously, and I know you know that to tell you how you feel. So one, in a community your size, I would have been pleased had you at 10%. So I think you have a really engaged community here. And I guess I'm not worried about whether this data is going to hold up come election day, regardless of the voter outcome, just based on we were pretty darn close in 2018 too. We did the same type of survey. It happened to be for facilities, but we were a couple of percentage points off between your survey result and what happened on election day. So whether it's statewide and us being right about 95% of the time, or Wauwatosa, about 6 years ago, that the data is pretty darn accurate.
Do you have any analysis around like the subgroup, the staff, parent and non-parent and some of those satisfaction scores, the like one, I don't know if it was 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, but the green, the yellow and the red bars. Do you have any breaks that down?
We do, yeah, and I can provide them on that data as well. So we can actually say, well, it's not in your report here. We can do it by those three subgroups. You're exactly right, and then we can even go down to the level of how do non-parents, non-staff in a community survey among other non-parents, non-staff in large districts in Wisconsin over the last 5 years. How do they feel when we're responding to a community survey? So that's a long answer to a short question, but the answer is yes.
Rob, I had a question about, I'm sorry.
I was going to go to Mr. Meyer and I'll come to Mr. Meyer.
Okay, so to speak to Dr. Hoyk's question, the 2018 survey, the questions were more aligned with a specific plan. So the reliability to count on the results against what was put in the referendum question, I would think would be better. This is less of a specific plan than those questions were then, which now goes to what you're saying, I believe. Also, this analysis is not weighted by population groups according to likelihood to vote, for example. So, but yet, on the other hand, it's a high number of the voters. So there could be something to what you're saying. Of course, we don't know, right? Because we don't know. I don't know, you don't know, but that there is no weighting here. And we know in election surveys that the really wise people who conduct the surveys do weight their responses to get a certain number of subpopulations and all this kind of stuff. But I believe the survey was a very good survey and the numbers are very reliable, but the numbers are for the questions asked and for those who responded. So I'm no certainty. So I'm trying to agree with you in a long-winded way, which is what so thanks.
Yeah, and the difficult part is you're right in the sense that the last survey was definitely facility related, which people get. People really understand facilities, especially with the type of work that you were doing then. People get additions to their home, they get roofs, they get furnaces, or in your case, boilers. Obviously, it's stuff that's very relatable because they have to do it to their own houses. I think you actually do have a pretty, well, not pretty, I think you do have a very well thought out plan here in terms of what was tested, especially for something that would go onto a ballot. So for an operational referendum, obviously it's a different type of question, but letting people know how you got into this position, what are the financial challenges, much like your last survey talked about the facility needs. If I'm a taxpayer who might be willing to support this, maybe, but how are you going to use my money? And that's what we laid out here. And then we did have the actual tax impact of, because $21 million per year, that doesn't mean anything to anybody until you can translate that, until we translate that into what does that actually do to my wallet and the amount of property value that I have. So I don't think I disagree with you. I think just to addend what you're saying is I think you do have a pretty solid, well thought out plan here in terms of what was tested, both, what's wrong, what you're going to do with the money, how much you are asking for, and how much that would affect people, and ultimately then what people support that on election day. You're totally right, though, in terms of the other concepts as we went on, whether it's about open enrollment or attendance boundaries, those are just less ballot focused. And you're absolutely right. Those are more maybe concept related to steal your own term.
But now to your point, a referendum question is very conceptual in its wording. So it can't be much more specific than what's in this survey. So we could have a really great plan, but not an ability to communicate that in the referendum question.
Mm-hmm. They are Latin. Yeah, it is. They are Latin.
I had a question. Do you have any idea of how many folks clicked on the additional links for more information, or even how long it took an average person to take the survey? I know in education, we can look at the time that a student sat down and took a test and also get some information on that.
So No and yes. So we don't track how many people clicked on that link. That is not something we attach to it. If it were going to our own website, we could, but because it went to your website, we don't have the ability to go behind the scenes to your website to do that. Um, I can speak general, but I could get an answer for you. So I can say in general, folks will spend between 6.5 and 9.5 minutes on any given community survey. That's about all people are willing to give you before they make up their mind. Again, we feel that's enough to give you predictive data, but folks are busy, right? They're trying to cook dinner and take a survey and figure out which kid is going to what practice and also who's doing what homework. So in general, it's about 6.5 to 9.5 minutes for any given community survey, regardless of who you are. And it all kind of comes down to what extent do I choose to leave comments.
If I can add to that, this is Sarah Ellis. I would have the ability to look at our website's Google Analytics from the date that the survey landed in mailboxes and or the date it was disseminated via email to families and staff members through the date that the survey closed and see how many people visited that web page. The caveat to that, though, is that I would not have the ability to tell you where they navigated to that page from. So if they typed in the URL on their own, if they went to the Wauwatosa School District homepage and then navigated, or if they clicked on the link in the e-survey, I wouldn't have the ability to tell you the origin of kind of what brought them to the site, if that helps.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I was just interested, I guess. So my question kind of relates to, I did quick math, but it seems like there's about 10 to 15% of undecided voters. And I just wonder, does that indicate anything to you, Rob? Do they need more information? Do they, so did they spend time collecting more information, especially some of those subgroups that may not have, looking how people like to receive information. I don't know that our non-parents get school district letters. I'm not sure like how accessible some of the information. So I just wonder kind of about that 10 to 15% that are.
Now that's a really good question. So a couple thoughts there. Some of those will make you feel better. Some of it may not. So when we do surveys in the Midwest, like Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, we find that some folks will choose undecided as a way to not be rude, even though full well they will go into the ballot box going to say no, but it feels like it's mean to tell you no on a survey. So some people in the Midwest will choose undecided. What we have actually found, well, two other thoughts, I guess. One, your undecided is actually fairly low relative to many other surveys we do. So had you been up, especially the slide I have up here for non-parents, non-staff, had you been in the upper teens, the 18, 19, even 20% range, that would not have shocked me. You're actually, for better or worse, most people in your community have made up their mind on the questions that you ask them, which is not a bad thing. People are giving you really clear data and how they feel. So that's the second point. The third point is as we look at our data and then we ultimately see what happens on election day. Had you asked me this question actually in 2018 when we gave you your data, we used to be able to count on approximately 1/3 of undecideds breaking towards yes and about 2/3 of undecideds breaking towards no. Over the last 2 to 3 years, that number dropped to about 1/4 of undecideds to yes, about 3/4 to no. As we look, especially in April of 2024 and April of 2023, our predictions are actually more accurate if we assume that you will pull over none of the undecideds as opposed to some fraction of them. Now, will you pull over some? Yes, there will be people that are undecided that will break towards yes. But I think thinking conservatively, I think it's an appropriate mindset to assume that those undecided will break towards no as opposed to breaking towards yes.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? Are undecideds persuadable? If taking what you're saying, so I said undecided, but really, I mean, I don't think so, but maybe you could show me a plan I'd like. Are they really entrenched in that undecided?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think that those undecided folks are just that. They're undecided, but I think the blessing and the curse is that it may or may not have anything to do with what you are doing. And let me couch that in two statements. One, in general, and this is going to be exceedingly obvious, but let me say it anyhow for my peace of mind. In general, as the cost and as the tax impact decreases, the likelihood of support will increase along with it. The cheaper, the more likely that you are to get support. At the same time, I think those undecideds aren't necessarily always reflecting what you are doing. They're also reflecting of what is my job situation going to be between now and November? What am I going to pay at the gas pump? What am I going to pay at the grocery store? And unfortunately, you can't control those things, right? So you can control how much you're asking, but I think those undecideds are also saying the dollars in my wallet, where else am I allocating those towards? And will I have enough left to support the school should I decide to go down that route? So there's just a lot of uncontrollables there. So again, a long answer to say, yes, they may break, but it may not be something based off of what you have control over.
Go ahead, Eric. So I had a few, and this slide is one that I had a questions on. Or just an observation. I'm struck by the definitely no is much stronger than the definitely yes. And so the fact that of that 36% that could be a yes, more than half of it is a probably yes, not a definitely yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in terms of like the entrenched voters, when I see over a third that are definitely no, they will remain in that camp. You're spot on that is a high number of 39% of the largest chunk of your community that are saying no to this plan as described. You're right.
So the next question is more theoretical or based in sort of the experience that you all have in doing this in a number of communities. Sure. We didn't give them a second option of a lower amount. Is there a way to get a sense of how, like over time, if a community sees that 40% definitely no, is there a way to figure out an amount that might move some people? Or is that not something we can figure out from this? It might be back to what Mr. Meyer was trying to ask.
We had that 6 years ago. We had that continuum.
Yeah.
Right. We had what you're saying you would like to see now, but I don't know whether we have it now.
Short answer is no. So based on the work that we did with y'all in February, the idea was the $21 million was the $21 million that you knew you would need in order to fund the programs and services that were allocated on the previous couple of slides. So I guess what you're hearing here is no to 21. You heard yes to that 2 million for employee compensation, but the way that this was designed with you in February is otherwise no. You know the number is somewhere between 2 and 21, but to ascertain that, no.
Yes, so that was what I was going to go on to. It's very striking that the gap it's a fairly large spread to go up to 59%, if I have that right, in the additional 2 million, with the question being asked based on the assumption that the 21 million would be voted for. So that's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And that's what I was getting at. Are there other pieces of data? In addition, the other one I was thinking about was the strong disfavor with cutting a lot of the programs. So if our budget is mostly staff, and then after that, some of the things that people are saying they want to keep, we either infer that I don't know what to infer on that. It's just really striking to me because they go in that goes in a very different direction. The 21 million. And so it might be too big of a leap to infer that a somewhat lesser amount could then be approved. But I was struck by those data going in basically in opposite directions as far as I would read it.
Yeah, I don't think you're off that number. There is a number between 2 and 21 million in that black box that would seem that voters would be willing to support. Obviously, what that is, you're right, that is unclear at this point. But I also think that, average Joe taxpayer doesn't know that 70 to 75% of any given school budget goes to staff. They just don't know that. So I think there'll have to be some very productive conversations among you as board members here of, what is our community telling us they don't want to cut, and how much can we prioritize that, while also going for a referendum that may require cuts because we know we're not going to get to 21 million over 5 years. Excuse me for a second while I plug in my computer.
Yeah, so thank you for clarifying that, because I think it's really important to see that there is some data that is angled towards don't say completely and don't offer us nothing.
Right. Yes.
Just for nothing.
Yep.
Don't ask us for that much for that many years.
I agree with you. And I am listening. I'm plugging in my computer. Excuse me for 1 second.
Oh, I understand. Absolutely.
One question, do you have any data or any historic data on in other districts based on non-respondents? Because one of some of the data you showed there, the age demographics 35 to 54 accounts for about 55% when you were back on that slide there. And I just thought immediately of the number of people I've talked to in the community that fall into those groups, that there's 2 voters in the household, but only 1 took the survey. And I said, I look at even my circle, not always, but in my immediate circle of a dozen, they talked about it, they discussed it, but 1 person took the survey. And I wonder if that number gets skewed at all by, there's potentially could have been more respondents if both in the household had particularly responded, specifically thinking of the residents and the ones that have children or are staff.
Plus, that's a high voting demographic as well.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts about that. One, and I know I said this before, and this is not exactly your point here, but I am really pleased that you got the 65 plus because of what pool or what proportion rather they will make up of your voters on election day. We've kind of found it to be a wash, honestly. So of the district or of the households that 1 person took the survey and the other one didn't, it almost cancels out the folks where there were 2 people in another household and 1 took it and one of them is yes and one of them is no. So that really hasn't had an effect on our prediction accuracy, only because you're going to get the yeses canceling out the no's, regardless of how many people are in the household. Fortunately, go ahead.
Where more than 1 took it, it was because they didn't agree.
That's usually and usually people are pretty excited to tell us that when they email us for another code, or if they tell you, my wife doesn't agree with me and I need another one to let her know why. So people are pretty open to telling us that when they need another code. Yeah.
Students? Reactions?
The only other thing that I have to say here, and this is kind of relative to your 2018 survey, is you're not in uncommon company, I guess maybe is a bad way to phrase that. So what we've seen, especially the last couple of years from the research side of our company, is the amount or the proportion of communities that are supporting operational referendums has declined. The proportion of operational referendums that have been approved has been declining in recent years. It used to be that operational referendums passed at a higher rate than capital referendums. That's flip-flopped, especially kind of post 2020, 2021, 2022. Operations is hard. There's ESSER funding. What happened with that? How much money did you get? There's confusion about that. There's confusion about the state budget and who got what money and who didn't. And then you got to go down the road of negative tertiary aid. And what the heck is that? And nobody thinks in that term. And mill rates are hard to understand for people that don't think in that. So we have found that operational referendums are more of an uphill battle in districts. It's not uncommon here. And I think you play that out, and you are not unlike many of the other customers that we've worked with, where people understand facilities. They know roofs, like I said, they know boilers, they know furnaces, they know windows, because it's things they have to do to their own house. Operational referendums in school finance is a very difficult thing to understand. So it really comes down to the cost here. How much is it going to cost me in my wallet to fund what was proposed in the survey?
Yeah, one other, I think, brief question. With the referendums on the ballot in April that just passed, of the ones that you did survey work for, how close did the communities come? Like, close did your data come to what happened in those communities in terms of passing or not passing?
Yeah, good question. So 20 of 23 in April, and over the last 5 years, the end value is 340, and we're at 94.5% accuracy.
I have just a question. Is there any correlation between political party lines and support of a referendum?
I'm only giggling because I have a 550-page dissertation that I'm pretty sure only my wife and maybe my mother have read that will address that. No is the answer.
Okay. Thank you.
It's not as strong as what one might think.
Sure.
One of my questions, and maybe I'm just musing about this right now. So right now, we receive about 11,000 and how many dollars per student?
19.
$11,019 per student. And what's the state baseline, like the lowest?
11,000.
So we're $19 above the lowest, you're allowed to.
That's what the state is considered to be the minimum.
The minimum. And Rob, how many, I think it said somewhere in the survey, how many districts do you know right now have, this may be out of your wheelhouse, are currently have an operating referendum in Wisconsin?
Ooh, I don't know. I know Baird has a slide that I can picture with that on, who currently, I don't know. And I could picture it in my mind. I know Baird has that answer of how many have an operational referendum in place. And they also have really good data on like how many districts are using an operational referendum for like X% of their budget. And I don't know, but I know that data is available.
Okay. In the survey, we articulated it was 70%. I'm not sure. So that's.
Yeah, so 70% have secured additional funding through a voter-approved referendum since the district has imposed revenue caps beginning in that 1993-94 biennium and as they took place.
May not be, but at some point.
Yeah, in that time, 70%, nearly three quarters have seen at least one approved operational referendum in the revenue cap era.
Not used to do.
We are there. There are only 30% of communities in Wisconsin have not approved an operational referendum. We are among those communities. We are also a community that has done that while being at the very low end of a per pupil allocation.
High end of having savings.
And a high end of having savings. There's also, I think, kind of the question that we got some feedback on is we have supplemented our budget through open enrollment, and the community is saying we would like to see less open enrollment. So which is a different change which is a choice the previous board made that we've continued of utilizing open enrollment as a revenue stream. So there's a desire not to necessarily cut many of the questions of like, do you want to see cuts here or there? The majority of our budget is made up of things that the community doesn't want to cut. It is a conundrum.
That's why I was pointing that out. Kind of pulls, it's like 21 million is not the right number. But nothing at all doesn't seem to be the right number either. Because nothing at all would be cuts.
Yep.
Significant cuts.
Mr. Meyer.
So I'm trying to figure of something to do to give voters something to vote for. And the idea that maybe we should get more money from the voters, but the question to take to them to say, we deserve more money from you, so please give it to us. As compared to, this is what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Will you vote for that? So now I'm just going to throw up a crazy straw dog here. I would say pick the number of residents enrollment that we think we will stabilize at. Because we have been going down in a lot of categories. We're about 52 something, the last number I saw. I would say, now I'm just going to throw out a number. Could be a wrong number, maybe one a different number. I would say, Wauwatosa, we expect our resident enrollment to stabilize at 5,000. And we think that will be 5 years out. When that day comes, this is what we will need for buildings. So our capital referendum is to target what we think that end state will be in 5 years. Now we need an operations referendum to get us there. And that at that 5-year point, we will be at equilibrium. We won't, or something like this. So I don't believe in falling in love with my own ideas. So ideas beget other people's ideas that are often better ideas. So I'm just throwing that out there to say, what do we think we're going to be 5 years from now? Because whatever we will be 5 years from now, in a capital sense, we need to fund the transition. Because transitions are expensive for us because of all the moving parts and the, all kind of stuff. Okay, so that's what I would say to conceptualize like that. 5 years, what's our target size that we think we're going to be at? We have to, we don't want to do deferred maintenance on a building that's going to be like, say we have an elementary school that we know there's one last one that needs to be replaced. Well, we don't want to put a bunch of deferred maintenance into that and then say, now we're going to rebuild you 5 years later.
Right.
That's what I mean. We want to tell us this is where we're going to end up.
5-year plan.
In a 5-year
With
plan.
the number of students potentially.
Yeah.
We'll assume 11,000, like go with the minimum that the state's going to do to get a sense of what we would get just based on.
Plus inflation or so, whatever
Right.
the
But I'm saying
historical.
we should,
Yeah.
we should
Okay.
take what, so let's just,
Yeah.
we should take what we think with no change in what the state is offering us.
Yeah, status quo from the state.
Just
Yeah,
to keep the numbers at that.
we're out of the
level.
prediction.
And then
business,
what
so,
we
yeah.
anticipate the cost would be.
Yeah.
So people can see.
So, and we think our resident students might be this much in 5 years. So we need this many elementaries. We need this many high school classrooms. And we're going to assume, maybe yes, but we're going to assume, we're going to tell people, we're either going to minimize open enrollment or mid it.
Numbers should be based upon
Right.
somewhere.
But just tell them what we're going to do. And then give them something to vote for. And if then we fulfilled our mission to put out our best proposal. And if the community says no, well, then they've said no, but we owe it to them to put our best proposal out there that we believe in, whatever that might be.
One point of information. I believe, I was just looking at the numbers of resident students.
Mhm.
I don't believe that they've been dropping.
No.
I believe that they're actually up.
Yes.
And where the drop has been in our students has been a drawdown of open enrollment students has been lower over the last 7 years, and that has come down.
Okay.
We did lose students during the pandemic, but when I looked over the last couple of years, I believe that we are stable to possibly up a little bit, and then and I don't know where it will land. So
The problem I see is that our elementary resident enrollment is stable, but in the 20-year average of increase in residents from 8th grade to 9th grade is 37 or 39, I forgot which, and our increase this past year was 1. So something happened where we're not pulling in more high schoolers who weren't here in grade school. So
and that does make sense because we've had two parochial schools closed.
Okay.
And our data from the analysis also showed that 2 other parochial schools have half as many students now as they did 10 years ago.
Okay,
So
but on the lines of don't fall in love with your own idea.
Yeah.
Whatever that number is, let's pick one.
Yep.
Let's agree on a number and we're going to size for that number.
And the general demographics of Wisconsin, even if we see ourselves as steady, we have to be realistic, the general demographics of the region for the next 5 years. We ought not.
I don't believe we're going to go up. I think that our projections from the demographer were over 15 years. There is a ever so slight increase. I think it was 200 over 15 years, which is really nothing.
Right.
And it's still fewer than we had at our peak in 2019-20.
Right.
1920, I think, was the 20-year peak in coastal schools.
We made that decision about building.
So I'll lose my train. But so let's pick the number. My problem with an operational referendum without a capital referendum beside it is that whatever our capital footprint is has a lot to do to drive our operational costs.
You're right.
So if we only have one referendum, we haven't told the community the whole story, not because we're not trying to, because we just haven't. So we say, here's our operational footprint we want. And to get there, here's our capital footprint. And to get there, we have a plan to get there. And this is how much it's going to cost or whatever. Okay.
And given what we were told about operational versus capital, it made sense to do the survey about the harder referendum to get, right? So if we're landing in the low 40s on the operational, that does not predict that we'd land nearly the same place on capital.
I do wonder, because when you look at like, where should the district cut? What are people saying the district should cut? So there's administration, which doesn't surprise me. That's going to be the thing. People are going to like, that's the easy.
But they don't even know the number of how much that could bring down. That's something we haven't.
No, and they also don't know like what, they see that as non-student facing, I think, right. and not recognizing kind of like how does our administration contribute to what our students learn? But the other part is closing schools. So I think to your point, Mike, like, this is what we said in the beginning of the survey. If you give us this 21 million, part of what that is it allows us to maintain all of our schools as is, essentially. And what I'm seeing is maybe people don't want us to do that.
May I weigh in?
Yeah.
I believe this survey, and Rob, thank you. I believe this survey provided exactly what you were looking for. It did exactly what you asked for. You asked, it didn't give you, we didn't go into it with a plan. We went into it with concepts to ask the community, so how are you responding to concepts? I think they gave us a very clear answer.
To help us build our.
I think the summary page is clear. The community is saying close schools. Now, we're not telling you what schools to close or what level to close, but you can't maintain your current footprint. The survey said that your current level of participation in open enrollment may need to be reviewed, either slightly or significantly. It clearly stated that they want to make sure that educators are compensated. Those are strong themes that came out. And I think the last thing that came out of it for me administratively is that the dollar amount that was posed in the survey was too high for the community. So now it's appropriate for us to say, what does an operational referendum look like at a different pace? I think what you're seeing statewide is that even school systems that pass operational referendums are still making cuts.
That's what I was going to say. I think the message here is any operational referendum needs to also come with cuts.
Correct.
I think that's a very clear message.
You're absolutely right, Dr. Worley. I think the message I'm receiving, not only in our community, but what I'm seeing across the state, is that people are citizens, taxpayers, constituents are saying that we can help bridge your operational costs, but we're not going to cover the full amount. And so we are expecting to see the organization make some tough decisions, but we'll help as well. And together we can bridge to the place that we need to bridge.
And that's reinforced.
I think that message came through.
That's reinforced by the data around handling financial, because most appropriately, most likely what people were trying to say there is that you're not spending enough time thinking about cuts.
Absolutely.
But I think we should tell them what our cuts will be. Like if we're short by
absolutely,
let's say 20.
Yeah.
Okay, we're short by 20. We're folks, we're asking you, we're short by 20. So we got to figure out 20. Well, 4 is going to be cuts or whatever. Picture. I don't know. Don't hang up on the number. This is what we're doing, so we don't have to ask for 20. But we're going to do this to do a 4 or 5, whatever. Let's just say 4. Now we need 16. Because I hear a lot, this is anecdote, I hear a lot of people say, okay, you need more money, I get that, but do something to try to tighten your belt some.
I also think that even within that, we're going to cut this much. There might be an ask in the community for us to say, and 4% of that's going to be here, 8%, not exact numbers, but general categories reflecting what they're interested.
So there's a lot of transparency. People love transparency. That, okay, this is what we're not going to have. If you vote yes, we're not going to have this. So don't think We're going to solve that problem with a yes vote. No, that thing is going to be gone, whatever that is, operationally or capital. Okay.
I think talking about cuts, I mean, I think the survey results made it very clear across all three groups that they do not want to cut teachers. They do not want to cut support staff. So that leaves administration and district staff. Do we even have 4 million that we can cut? And
or 1 or 7 or
do you know what? So
I think that's what we're
even,
saying, the education. I mean,
is that even feasible? Because like to do the cuts, we'd have to cut the things that the people don't want to
a
cut.
percentage of them. Yeah, that was what I was saying before, is we're gonna have to show them that those cuts are gonna come out partially, because that's transparent. If we just say, we're gonna cut 4 million and then we know that we can't cut all that out of district administration because we're not spending that much on district administration, then people are going to need to know that we're going to go ahead and we're going to have to cut in these other areas. And we're not really giving them the option to vote. We might lose a few people who then become not in favor of it. That's something to consider. But I think it's the transparency that's important, because if we say we're going to cut this much and then people are unhappy for the next several years about what we cut, when we know that we're going to have to cut curriculum some, we're going to have to cut staff some, we're going to have to cut perhaps some of the extracurriculars some in order to make this work, or certain programs. That they ought to know that ahead of time, because otherwise whoever's serving on the board over the next 5 years is going to be hamstrung. They're going to be unpopular.
That leads to my next question. Do we have the long-range facility plan?
Yes. That maybe this is a good opportunity for me to share that again. I want to thank the fine team at School Perceptions. This information is one of 4 data points that the board has requested. You wanted a community-wide survey, and I think that the community-wide survey gave you a lot of information. You convened a task force. That task force will be providing you their final input, perspectives, and direction in the next few weeks. The third component, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, is that you're going to have community listening sessions where people can provide things. And then the final piece of data, the fourth, is that we will administratively provide you recommendations in the areas of facilities, a long-range budget plan. So we have a plan. We'll present that plan around transportation, around policy, specifically 5113, which is open enrollment, and policy 5120, which is attendance boundary areas. And then the fifth area is academic programming. So we'll have recommendations for all 5 of those areas. When you take those 4 data points, you will have information that the community is giving you direction on, but you'll also have a plan that we've devised. You asked for that in February. We've been working feverishly since that board retreat to provide every piece of data that you requested in February.
Now, it could be for me, I don't want cuts and whatever left status quo, that's what we're going to go with. I want our vision and what's our end state that we want to get to. So we could say, well, we got to reduce by 1 million. I'm going to cut 2 million over here, but add 1 million over here, because there's something I'm not doing enough of right now. And that has to be increased.
Or if the pathway to doing what we want to do includes spending some funds in order to do that appropriately, we have to have that in the larger plan. I think that Dr. means that I think that's part of the vision. I did one more survey question, which is, there any themes in the qualitative data, the comments that we should be paying attention to?
I'll turn it back.
Go ahead.
No, Rob, that's your question.
Okay. Yeah, so we did actually put together a comment theme analysis for you, which does exactly that. So I guess while I'm pulling that up, the way that I like to do this, actually, and going back to a question from a few minutes ago, is looking at them in totality. The problem is when you look at them online, you'll get some folks that are the definitely yes, and the very next survey taker will be the definitely no. And that's very hard data to reconcile, because those are two direct differentiating pieces of qualitative information. So the way I actually like to do this is by disaggregating, by saying, show me the folks who are undecided about something, and then show me why they're undecided. That will give you really good nuance into why they're undecided. So what we did for you, and again, Devon has this, so you can take a look at it, but it's broken down by open-ended question. So for instance, just on the operational referendum specifically, we approach it as what lessons are we learning from the qualitative data that people told us. So one, there are some confusions about the previous referendum and this referendum. People just don't think in terms of referendum. So they remember a referendum before, but they don't know that there's a facility focused referendum and operational referendum, and you really can't use facility funding for something else. They just know that X amount of money was handed to the district before. They don't know how by law you're restricted to use that information specifically for the type and the wording of the question. Otherwise, what we also saw is much like your conversation that you've had over the last 20 minutes is kind of unprompted. Even before people got to sections on open enrollment and closing schools, there were suggestions to investigate those before those sections of the surveys even came up. So for instance, just on the operational referendum question, this was 6 pages before open enrollment. And people said, well, to what extent do we need to consider closing schools as a cost saving measure to bring this operational referendum down? How does open enrollment play into this? What is the impact on finances if we increase or decrease open enrollment? And then making sure that whatever decisions you make are clearly communicated to the community. So I thought that was fascinating that people brought up schools and open enrollment pages before they ever got into it in the survey. So those were the two. And then again, just the confusion of what money are you allowed to use and for what purposes based on what we said yes to in years past.
Rob, one of the things so I don't remember, did you specifically work with us in 2018?
I did not. No, I was still teaching then, recovering social studies teacher.
So thank you. Yeah. One of the things that I found, I was just stepping onto the board at the time, and we did a survey, as Mr. Meyer was articulating, where we looked at kind of like a sliding scale.
Yep.
And I came onto the board just as our facilities committee, which was community driven, yep. Mr. Meyer was the board liaison to it. They identified in 2017, 2018 $350 million of needed
yep.
Work that was either needed or desired work that was done across the district.
Yep.
So that was 2017, $350 million.
Yep.
And the community came back and told us, sounds good. We're comfortable with about 125 million. And so we looked at the data and it said, we've got about $350 million that we have found where we need to invest. The community right now is comfortable, based off of their community feedback and surveys, approving about 125 million.
Yep.
And I remember as a new board member, there was a sense of we were asking for a little bit more than maybe the survey told us, but we felt like the community was going to get there. It was close and ultimately passed with a little bit over 60%.
We should have asked for more and built a new Roosevelt School, for example.
Yeah.
Because we had to sink a lot of maintenance into that afterwards. So
yeah. And so one of the things that I'm reflecting a lot on and I've heard from the community is don't keep asking us for money.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally get it. The board did not ask for money from the community from about 1992 to 2018. So a long time. And so the community isn't used to being asked for money.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, a lot of work was not done for a generation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm just musing about this, of thinking, how do we both be transparent?
Yeah.
The deferred maintenance is still going to be deferred. It will get more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's another board's concern to worry about. I know we've got a facilities plan that we'll hear about and some other items. But I'm hearing loud and clear, invest in things that are closest to students.
Yep.
Divest from open enrollment to some degree. Take seriously the idea of right-sizing our footprint. And
the process of the survey did exactly what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
If we went into the survey with if we would have gone into the distribution of the survey with a plan already in place, what I've heard from the community is that people have said, you already know what you want to do. You're not listening to us. And so I think we can now take the feedback. And again, later this evening, you're going to talk about how you're going to take qualitative feedback through the listening sessions. One of the visions that the board that we collectively worked on was to create a process that would listen to the community in a level at a point that is unprecedented. And I think we've achieved that level. And so then if I shouldn't say when, but if the board decides to go to the community and ask for financial support, it will be done on the foundation that you've done your due diligence, that the district has done its due diligence in requesting feedback from people. So this survey is just one of 4 data points that you're going to review before you make a decision. And I think you're right, Dr. Jessup Anger. I think there's some themes that are emerging, but I think there will also be things that emerge from the task force. There will be things that will emerge from your listening sessions as well.
Very notable from 92, there were 2 questions on the ballot. One question for elementary money and another question for middle school improvements. The middle school question was no, it failed. So we won, we got a win and we got a loss back then. I was just a parent then. It was a long time from being on the board, but I don't know why the middle school question, it was actually a junior high back then. No, it was still in middle school, but it didn't have 6th grade. That's right. So we did have a loss back then on the ballot and a win.
I think one piece that I'd add, Eric, just to kind of follow up what you said there, going, an entire generation or more with this not being normal to ask for a referendum of this type. I think it speaks to the demographics that we saw in there when we look at that 54% of the respondents don't have kids in the district. I look at where I live in the village, look at my neighbors. We're the only ones on our entire block that have kids. We bought our house right after that referendum, and the previous owner sold their house. They voted against the referendum, sold their house to get out. I look at what percentage of people will do the same thing, and the change in real estate and the transfers, regardless of what happens, they say, hey, if this is going to happen, I'm not going to be here. And it's going to cycle in people that don't have kids and change that demographic there for the future. There are people that are wanting to come in. And I say that because talking to a lot of my real estate friends, there are people in our community on both sides. I looked at the East and West that are paying over $7,000 a month in rent to just get into TOSA. People with kids, their parents are currently in TOSA because they're waiting for the following school year. There's a lot of people still trying to get in. We're seeing the trends in there and I spoke about this and I've talked about this before I came on the board. We're not ever trying to be Naperville or Oak Brook, but we're growing at the same rates and pace that those communities down in Illinois and other communities in the state are. You start to see how the neighborhoods change. One thing that we know for certain is Wisconsin is old. I'm from Florida. Wisconsin is old. Houses are old. Housing stock is old. People don't necessarily want their parents and their grandparents' homes anymore. We just saw one in here just a couple of weeks ago that sold for over $900,000 that got knocked down. That's going to be rebuilt into a much bigger home. That's going to have a larger tax base. We're going to see a lot more of that. I said you look around the parts of the neighborhood, no matter what side you're in, what neighborhood you're in, we're going to see more of those things. My neighbors 2 doors down in either direction they were boomerangs that came back in after their kids graduated. And they're like, well, we don't know where we're going to go, but we wanted to come back here. And I think that same thing, people are looking for places to go that may not necessarily want a referendum or want to spend the money because they don't have kids in the system. They don't have a dog in the fight other than their tax dollars. It's going to cause them to make different decisions for those that are the parents, the staff, the people, and the residents that do have kids in there for what it's going to look like for the next 5 and 10 years.
Yeah. One of my requests for the community will always be, go take a look at your last 10 years of taxes that have gone to the public schools and actually look at how much it has changed. Put it in an inflation calculator and feel free to reach out and email to me and let me know how your taxes have gone up or down over the last 10 years, either in steady dollars or in inflation control dollars. And I think most people will be shocked in Wauwatosa what that will be. I suspect the majority of people, unless they have some major work to their home, are paying less in inflation adjusted dollars today than they were a decade ago in their public schools. Rob, thank you for your time.
You bet.
I'd be curious to read your dissertation.
Oh, I don't put yourself through that.
Can't believe you wrote 500 pages. Somebody should have stopped you.
Yeah, where was my advisor? I could have used you.
36. Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to see a copy of that final product. I'm
You bet.
a wonky political guy, so that's pretty interesting to me.
Yeah. No, I can. You'd be number 3, by the way.
Rob, before we sign off, in all seriousness, please thank your brother for his service, and
I
we
will.
hope
Yes.
enjoy
Appreciate that.
connecting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will tell him right now. I think he owes me a highlight any second here. All right. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. See ya.
We've got one more item on our agenda. It is 8:35. Mr. Brian Nickel is going to join us to talk about engagement session planning. Do we want to take 5 minutes or do we want to keep moving? I'm seeing from my colleagues that we want to keep moving. If anybody needs to get up and use the restroom, please do. But we'll just keep moving right on to our next topic.
Mr. Jessup Anger, or Dr. Jessup Anger, excuse me. The board has requested the opportunity to engage with the community. You have scheduled 3 listening sessions. The dates of those listening sessions are May 20th. That will take place at Longfellow Middle School. May 28th. That session takes place at Madison Elementary School. And then the final session is on June 5th, and that will take place at Whitman Middle School. We've asked for the assistance of the Donovan Group, the Donovan Communication Group, to help frame the process around your listening sessions and how the data will be collected for the sessions on May 20th, 28th, and June 5th. And so Mr. Brian Nickel from the Donovan Group is online now, all the way from the Green Bay area, to walk you through what those sessions will look like and what the report will finally look like when you receive your data.
I just a quick question about because I know we talked about making sure that 2 board members were at each listening session. And then I was a little bit confused because I think I'm listed to go to 2 of them. Am I assigned to 2 of the 3 meetings?
Are there more than 2 people at one of those? Because I could do more, but I only said yes to 1 because the way it was set up, I was like, well, we're supposed to be assigned to 1. So
Based on the calendar, like for instance, on the 20th, it has Liz, Jenny, and Lynn attending.
20th? No, I can't do the 20th.
Oh.
Are you saying she accepted the invite?
She accepted the invite.
So on May 20th, I have Liz and Jenny assigned. On May 28th.
I just accepted the general invite and went to all of them.
On May 28th, Eric and Lynn. And on June 5th, Eric and Jenny.
I can attend June 5th.
Julia, can you just share that one more time?
Minimum, more people could come.
Right.
Right.
Yes, so assigned on May 20th, Liz and Jenny. May 28th at Madison, Eric and Lynn. And June 5th at Whitman, Eric, Jenny, and Jessica.
Jenny's not going to be attending the June 5th.
I'll be an alternate.
Okay, so Jessica and Eric.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you put me on for May 20th.
May 20th, Philip. Okay, thank you.
And so I'll add, Ms. Summers and I will work on finalizing what you just worked through, and we'll put it out to all of you so you have it in writing, so you know which dates you are expected to attend. But as Dr. Worley shared, obviously all board members are welcome to attend any of them. They will be posted. But I think your objective was to have certain members who were assigned to the sessions.
Someone would be there.
Yes. So I
The
think
20th, I'm going to be representing the board at West High School for the awards.
I will be there on the 20th, but I'm glad you're going to represent the board.
I mean, it's welcome. You're welcome. They want as many board
So
members.
I'll be there, but
You're not going to sit up on stage, huh?
well, I will, but you're a parent, right? So
I'm both.
you're both. So I think you.
I'm just sitting up, then you're.
I'm
not doing anything. I'm just sitting
okay.
there.
Okay. Well, I'll be there.
Okay, perfect.
I'll be there with you.
Perfect.
But I'm not inclined to. I'm shy. Let's put it that way. I really am. So
I am too.
So we have Mr. Nickel from the Donovan Group ready to make his presentation on the process for the listening and engagement sessions. Mr. Nickel, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Means. Am I coming through okay from Green Bay?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And are you seeing a green slide on your screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's begin. First of all, just briefly, I know I've had the opportunity to meet some of the individuals on the board, but a little bit about myself. I'm in my second year as a partner with Donovan Group. As you may know, Donovan Group is based in Wisconsin. In fact, our founder, Joe Donovan, is a parent, a proud parent of two TOSA grads and one soon to be TOSA grad this year. Prior to me joining the firm as a partner, I was 17 years in the Howard Swamico School District, 9 years as an administrator, director of communications, working alongside Damian LaCroix, the superintendent, and then 8 years as a sixth grade teacher. And prior to that, right out of college, 9 years spent at my alma mater, UW Green Bay, working in athletics, media relations. I'm a proud product of Wisconsin Public Schools, both UW Green Bay and Toma High School. Really appreciate your service to the board. Both my father and grandfather served as school board members in my hometown of Toma. And congratulations to the officers who are going to lead in TOSA for the next year. As you may know, the Donovan Group is proud to serve exclusively public schools, not just here in Wisconsin, but throughout the nation in the last 20 years. And we're grateful for our continued partnership with Dr. Means and our continued partnership with the Wauwatosa School District. So our time together tonight, you've had a lot of hard, thoughtful work on that survey report and that survey data. Always appreciate hearing from Rob and School Perceptions. Our time together will be brief, although I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I want to talk about the goals of the events. I want to talk about the roles and format of the events. And I want to talk about next steps, although Dr. Means already pointed very specifically at the why and the what of next steps as it relates to board decision making. So broadly speaking, in working both with Dr. Means and Ms. Ellis, our goals for the event is primarily to provide an engagement opportunity, not just for board members, but for community members to be able to have thoughtful, personal discussions in an informal format. The areas that we arrived on for the different sections of the open house format, we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. But as Dr. Means mentioned earlier, the goal of these events, in addition to those community engagement opportunities, is a data source to support board decision making. You're going to have robust quantitative data from this community survey. You're going to have thoughtful research basis from the work of the TOSA 2075 task force. I've had the opportunity to attend a handful of those meetings and watch that group at work. And then these listening and engagement sessions are going to provide you a different type of qualitative data, not just from the participants' point of view, but also from board members' point of view. As you listen, as you enjoy these conversations, you're going to be able to provide your reflections on the conversations with the folks who come out and visit as well. And then Dr. Means also mentioned the administrative recommendations forthcoming in a linear fashion after these three resources for you. So as you know, we've been hard at work spreading the word to encourage community participation. Just hearing the last three conversations or last 3 minutes of conversation from the board, it's a busy time of year for sure. There's a lot going on both in and out of the district, but we're excited about providing this type of format and providing this type of opportunity for folks to come out, have a conversation on any or all of these 6 key topics. And you're going to note that there's alignment here between these topics, these different sections, and the work of that task force: transportation, policies, academics, finances, facilities, and the task force itself, which Dr. Means will be able to provide expert witness to their work over the last 10 months or so. So in terms of event roles and format, We arrived at an open house format because we wanted both the tone and the opportunity to participate to be informal. We wanted to remove barriers to participation, both in terms of not having, perhaps that 2+ hour sit and get experience, which certainly might be preferable to some community members, and they can receive information that way if they were, to choose to attend and listen in at a task force meeting or choose to attend and listen in at a board meeting, for example. This format, we really wanted to have a self-guided experience, an opportunity for folks to come in, stay as long or as little as they would like, and have those meaningful conversations, both with district leaders and board members. Ms. Ellis has been hard at work in providing packets of background materials that any visitor will be able to use as a guide for the evening. A lot of those background materials also align with the work of the task force. So they'll be seeing some of the research and backing information that the task force itself has used to discuss and chew on, if you will, some of these challenges for the district. We'll have district leaders staffing all 6 of those stations that I mentioned earlier, and they'll be primarily there to answer questions and to guide conversations. The board members who attend, I appreciate that folks are already signed up and have time blocked on the calendar. You're able to and encouraged to float between those stations and engage community members, listen, learn, and share regarding any of the topics that bring people out that evening. My role at these events, and I will be attending all 3 evenings, is going to be to facilitate the collection of feedback and questions from the participants that may not have been answered throughout the course of the evening and those conversations. How that process is going to look and work is we're going to both provide a digital opportunity to share feedback, and we'll go analog with a hard copy in their packet as they come in. So we're going to have an exit ticket that asks 2 basic questions. What else would you like to ask the board, or what else would you like to share with the board as it relates to these topics? And then finally, anytime we endeavor to ask the community to give of their time and their thoughts, we want to know about the experience that they have that evening. Feedback in terms of process, we're always going to ask that question so that if the board were to consider something similar down the road, you'll have something, a data basis for your decision making and to learn from. So we'll have the ability for folks to either share this information on site by filling out the form. They can log on using the QR code, providing feedback online while they're there, or they can certainly take it home and reflect a little bit and then enter that information. Similarly, we're going to ask the district administrators who are staffing each of those stations to enter their reflections using these same questions and using the same form. It'll be a nice cross-check for us to be able to sort of validate, if you will, the nature and the tone and the breadth of these conversations that we have at the event. From here, myself and our firm will provide an analysis of this qualitative data. We'll come up with not a whole lot different than what Rob described in terms of the analysis that you would do on a survey of an open-ended comment section, open-ended question. We'll do a theme of the types of questions that people are asking, the types of information they want to share. And it might provide a really nice cross-reference to some of that quantitative data that the board just collected through that community survey. And again, having some experience with community surveys myself, both in Howard Swamico and with Donovan Group, I would wholeheartedly celebrate that response total nearing 5,000 and that 65+ subgroup. That's a really good news takeaway from your data set that you got this evening. I would not want to let that go without being celebrated. Congratulations on an outstanding set of data. So in terms of timeline and next steps, we're underway. I've highlighted the 3 examples of decision-making material that you have chosen to gather as it informs your long-term finance and facilities planning. Tonight's survey report to the board is the first in a series of 3 reports that you'll receive. That TOSA 2075 task force report coming up in June. And then in mid-June, at the culmination of our 3 listening engagement sessions, we will provide a report and a summary of the data and the feedback collected from folks who come out and have conversations with us that evening. Dr. Means earlier mentioned an additional 4th source, and that is, of course, the administrative recommendations. That is a fast and furious overview of the goals of the events, the structure and format of the events, and the next steps and what data you can expect from our firm in terms of how we will report out the findings of those events. I'm happy to lean on Ms. Ellis and Dr. Means to answer any questions you might have about the plans coming up on the 20th, 28th, and 5th.
I'm gonna go to Dr. Worley and then I'll just kind of make our way around the table.
Can you talk about the decision to have board members float rather than being a station where people could stop and actually talk to board members as board members? That's one question. And the second is the themes of the 6 stations. Could we know a little bit more about what those are? Or are we going to be helping outline what those are?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for that question. And I think in my haste to provide a quick overview, I may have glossed over the themes that we've communicated. In the little light blue box here in the middle of the postcard that is being sent out as an invitation are those 6 themes: transportation, policies, academics, finances, facilities, and the TOSA Task Force 2075. As Ms. Ellis and I discussed, what is the best role for the board, both in terms of thinking the customer experience of citizens who are going to come out and seek to engage in conversations, but also wanting to put board members in a position where they can truly have a listening session experience. We thought that rather necessarily assigning 6 board members to 6 stations for the evening, that it would be more productive both from the customer experience perspective and for the board members' perspective to allow that freedom to move around and to join in conversations, either where there might be a coalescence of interest around a specific topic, or where there might be, specific areas of expertise, interest, or passion on the board member's part. I know that there are lots of factors and variables that you are weighing as you consider long-range facilities and financial planning. We felt it best to untether board members in this experience and in this opportunity as people sort of self-guide their way through conversations and self-select conversations, and tether down rather the topics and tether down the administrative experts on these topics, and giving the board members a little bit more freedom was the goal.
So mine wasn't being assigned to on the 6th. Mine was the question of why isn't there a 7th, which is a place, a station to talk to board members about any of these topics.
We didn't discuss that station specifically. We definitely, in terms of our planning, honed in on a topic-based experience. And then as we talked about role of the board and wanting to create as much freedom and flexibility for board members as possible, that's probably what drove the decision to have sort of that board member as floater concept.
That's what I'm saying is I think the board should have a conversation about this. If this is a board engagement session, that we ought to have this conversation as a group about what we want to have happen at that session and how we want it to be structured. That's what I'm proposing. I don't know that I'm right about this. I just want to have that conversation with my peer board members about the role of that. I'm also not 100% clear yet what people will be experiencing in each of these stations. So it's really hard to get a good sense of what that's going to be like for the participants. I'm not going to call them consumers or clients; they are participants. I'd like to know a little bit more about when they walk up to this table, what will they be experiencing?
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about was having briefs similar to what the task force had experienced and studied. In addition, the board has some recent survey data that can be shared, and certainly is going to be shared publicly between now and those listening session events. The other opportunity, quite clearly in a listening session format, would be for people to bring their questions to both administrative experts in each of these topics, but also to board members. So, allowing the individuals who choose to invest their time to come out and have these conversations to initiate, both in terms of gravitating to topics of their interest, but also initiate a conversation at a point of entry that's of interest or curiosity to them. As I think about policies, and as I think about the survey data the board received tonight, I think open enrollment would probably be a topic that we would expect to hear people come and ask questions about on those evenings.
So one final follow-up. We also collected some of our own data this year. How is that being presented that evening? We have both on Mural and on qualitative data collected at our events. How is that being integrated to this event?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer to that. I was not aware of those data sources, but certainly I'll defer to Ms. Ellis or Dr. Means. I think the flexibility of that would allow flexibility of the format of the events would allow us to certainly include or integrate any relevant data or prior conversations on any of these topics.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
So I was curious too as to our role, and also I guess, I think we're doing our kind of debrief with Dr. Means on the TOSA 2075 task force before, or I'm sorry, 2 of these listening sessions will occur before we have that update from you. So I was like, I feel like the board is not equipped necessarily to, with all of this information.
So the report from the task force is likely to come to the board the week of May 28th, 29th. And so we are also, as an administrative team, planning to provide our recommendations to you that week as well. Hence, I've asked to set up meetings with the board so you can go over those items. The sessions, as you see, are scheduled for May 20th, the 28th, and then June 5th. So I don't know if they're necessarily coinciding with one another, but there's a lot of information that will be coming to you in the next few weeks. And I did not want you to just simply receive the data and not have any opportunity to meet with you one-on-one, hence the scheduling of the meetings.
I think there are questions. Good, though, is that we're actually going into these engagement sessions without all of the data, which I find problematic.
Yeah, I feel like it being specifically a board engagement session, to Dr. Worley's point, I think that there will be an emphasis on, talking with board members. And I just don't know that I feel super, I think I need more preparation for
May 20th.
Yeah, for May 20th. Yeah. And also, I'm just a little confused. I've seen more and more communications coming out calling us the Board of Education, but we are not a Board of Education, correct? We're a school board. I don't know that that matters. I just saw there was just a discrepancy in 2 of the different things that were reported. One said
I think they're interchangeable.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I know we had a conversation before, and I thought you told us that we were not a Board of Education.
To your point, we have a policy that tells us what we name ourselves.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know. I didn't know. I mean, I just wanted to be clear and consistent.
I do just want to add, just to add to that, if one of the 6 stations is the task force, but nobody will have, until the last one, there won't be any task force information to present, or, you can say what they did, I guess, but there won't be.
The district's website on the task force, in my view, has been comprehensive, certainly given the scope and the length of time the task force has been at work. What we envisioned for that station and for Dr. Means staffing that station was, again, to just be able to have someone there to answer questions about process, to answer questions about the stage in which the task force is currently operating and what next steps in terms of the board receiving the task force's work.
I think when we originally thought, I'm just reconceptualizing this, because I think when we originally thought about having these sessions, it was going to be later in the summer, which I totally understand why we've moved it up so that we're making some of these decisions earlier. But weren't we doing these after the task force? So we were
supposed to see the task force information first.
What do you think about the task force recommendations? Tell us, give us your feedback about the task force recommendations. And now, with the timing off, I'm just trying to figure out how this adds to what we already have done as a board. We spent a lot of time this winter and early spring offering all of these different listening sessions.
We had most of these topics.
I think that's why
already.
your suggestion, Dr. Worley, is a good one, of taking the data that you've already gained through facilities and academics. I'm trying to think of your 3rd session. Academic culture. That should inform this
If these
process.
if these are school district listening sessions and mostly presented by school district staff, that is a different feel to it for me.
And so I think how I was thinking of these is that these are really district level decision making. The board is there listening about those district decisions that need to be made. The board, in our governance role, will make decisions about what do we go forward with on referendum or not. But these are really districts. I experience them as, it's very gray, but district issues and topics. and having the expertise there from the district staff, I was imagining that I would be there listening, possibly answering questions and so on, but more listening to what the community is articulating. And they would be possibly coming with questions. They wouldn't be coming, many of the questions, I don't foresee them coming to me. But they're coming to the district leadership and experts, the staff who are doing the work and the role. Certainly some people may have words and conversations, but I'm listening to them talk about their goals for transportation, their response to some of these components. The 6 briefs, I think, lay out pretty specifically the district is going to have recommendations, the 2075 task force, and that I would be then as a board member listening to what's the community reaction to some of those big questions that we asked the task force to grapple with. I agree. In an ideal world, maybe all the reports would be ready to come and people would have a chance to digest, but our timing doesn't quite line out that way. And I know these have been advertised pretty broadly, so I think we're locked in on dates at this point.
Well, I would say too, Eric, if I may, like it specifically says on there that this is a chance for you to connect with your board representatives and ask questions. So I just don't know that I feel prepared to answer questions. I guess that's what I was saying. Like, I don't feel like I have the information specifically. Well, a lot of the information. I mean, I don't know, some information, but not everything to answer questions that these themes that have been laid out. Like, I won't necessarily have answers to the TOSA Task Force 2075. And it's
in fact, we've been asked not to be
participants
or particularly involved in the task force.
Yeah, I think in terms of format and also in terms of, again, that concept of board members floating, the goal would be that questions on any of these topics would be met by a district administrator who has content area knowledge and specificity and expertise, and that a board member would not be on an island per se, or so to speak, on any topic, because both in terms of layout of the room and ideally the structure of the experience, you would have someone at your shoulder, both listening alongside you and potentially answering questions, allowing you to, as Dr. Jessup Banker suggested, listen in on the conversation and defer answers to someone from the district administration, rather than be in that question answering stance, if you will, as a board member. So, perhaps parsing the language a bit here, the opportunity for board members to listen, the opportunity for community members to ask questions, maybe of administration, perhaps more than board, but also key, I think, would be to provide input and feedback on these topics in a different format. That would ideally augment and supplement what you've already collected, both in terms of the survey data and in terms of the research and the in-depth work of the 2075 task force.
Dr. Boyd?
I want to come back to Lynn's thought about how this is structured. I mean, I know we've, in many of our other listening sessions where we've had breakout opportunities, like the board members are kind of circling around. I do find, for me, at least when I do that, I don't feel like I get a real sense of what's going on. And I also find as a person who doesn't particularly love going up to strangers and talking to them, I do find that I gravitate toward the people that I already know and go talk to them, which isn't going to be helpful. And I would be much more comfortable if we had a spot to sit and people who wanted to come to us and talk to us could do that. And
I think that's an adjustment we could absolutely make.
I think the other part of that is that, we represent the community, and do the people who are coming to the tables feel comfortable disagreeing with the experts at the tables? I just want to make sure that people can feel like they can give feedback. They're not just taking in information. And that was part of where I was going with, what's the best way for school board members to be involved? Because I feel like I would want people to walk over to me and say, hey, I just went to this table and this doesn't make sense to me. Would they say that in front of the table? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the opportunity, and again, I think style and personality will feed into each individual's approach, right, as they come to an open house format as this. But the opportunity also to provide feedback after the fact, anonymously, to process the experience and share any other questions that either they feel they might not have had addressed, or share a perspective that to your point, they might not have been comfortable sharing in the company in the room. I think that feedback element can be constructive as well.
So I think a couple of things I've heard is that we're going to do some tweaking with having a board specific area. So there'll be an opportunity to kind of go and engage in a specific, kind of with the board in a specific spot.
Are other board members thinking that? Do we want to, if we're gonna have 2 or 3 people there, maybe someone sits there and other people float? I mean, I just want us to have the conversation about it, because I think that we obviously don't have enough people there to cover all of the tables any given night. And one thing is that if we had known this a few weeks ago, I might have felt differently about how many people we should have. I feel like this format has been brought to us very late in the game, and that's just a piece of feedback that I'll share. It's uncomfortable for me to be talking about this just like 2 weeks out. So.
Any other changes or adjustments well, I guess let's ask the first question. Are people comfortable with this adjustment? And if there's 3 folks there, that if somebody wants to pop into different conversations, that as long as that area is staffed, boarded, as long as we're boarded at that place.
Will we be receiving any more information prior to the first board engagement session, just on more details on what it's gonna look like?
Packet they were talking about,
Yeah.
the packet that everyone's gonna get when they come in. There was a packet, right?
Correct. I'll ask Ms. Ellis to step in there. I know she's been compiling and assembling the different elements of what that packet will include, including a guide for the evening, sort of an explanation of the event for people who attend.
Yes. So the folder that individuals will receive when they attend each listening and engagement session will contain a copy of each of the briefs that's available online. It will also contain an infographic style sheet that has some takeaways from the presentation that Dr. Means and Mr. Brightman have given to various PTA and PTO groups and neighborhood associations over the past several months. It will also include a printed version of that kind of exit ticket that Mr. Nichols showed on screen just a few minutes ago. And we're working on compiling any other pieces of data, including the survey data for individuals to take home with them or to browse while they make their way around the various tables in the room.
And Ms. Ellis, can we then move from this evening with the assumption going forward that the data that was collected by the school board will be part of those under facilities, the facilities night data, under academics, the academics night data, and trying to find a place to put the school culture data?
Yes. Are you referring to the information in that mural site?
We have mural, and we also have the data that we collected the night of. So those have all been turned over to Julia.
And we're getting.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
I just want to make sure
we will make sure that those are included as well.
and that they match, that they are presented in the same, general level of feedback that TOSA 75 feedback is, because
Absolutely.
I think our goal in doing that is to provide another opportunity for community to share their thinking.
Yes, thank you for that, Dr. Worley. We will be sure that all of the data collected through those sessions as well is included for the attendees.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It looks like the task force members are going to get the results from their survey, their voting on the 15th. Can we get that at the same time?
We'll try to get it to the board as quickly as possible.
Any other items the board wants to make sure is included? Any adjustments to format, information, so that folks feel as prepared as possible going into these sessions?
What is, besides the mailing, what are the points of sharing that are going to happen or have happened for this event? School newsletters, Is there going to be a general email going out from the district office to everybody who signed up for those?
I'll defer to Ms. Ellis.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm asking whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So we do have in this week's weekly update and moving forward a comprehensive timeline of all of the various activities and engagement opportunities for community members over the next month and a half, leading up to that June 17th date. In addition, we will put information in the newsletter. There's been a social media campaign that's been running on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. So that will continue throughout the process as well. We've sent out the postcards to each residential address in Wauwatosa. And then we actually did some research on various realtor groups and local businesses in Wauwatosa and made sure to send out specific invitations to those addresses as well. Also to some local dignitaries and continuing to keep that information front of mind in the newsletters as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When you, for any media posts or things that are going to be done still, like moving forward, can you please specify for people somewhere in the direction what door they enter in? This came up like over and over again in our engagement sessions that people don't know where to enter into the building for these sessions and they get really confused, especially for schools that are bigger, like our middle schools.
Yes, thank you for that. We will absolutely do that. We will also make sure to have those large A-frame signs outside of the main doors and then directional signage within the building as well, helping to guide people to the appropriate location. And I know Ms. Summers and I have been working as well with our rec department to make sure that there is a recreation department staff member at various doors, particularly at the middle schools, to help let people in and then also direct them to the appropriate space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So at these buildings, are the engagement sessions going to be held in areas that are accessible to wheelchairs and other disabilities? Are there going to be like entrances that will accommodate that?
So at Longfellow and Whitman, both of the events are being held in the cafeteria, which to my understanding are accessible. Madison, the event is actually, that's also being held in the cafeteria, which again, to my knowledge is accessible as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for that. Any final items on this from the board? Thank you all for a really good discussion on this. It is 9:12 p.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second.
Please call roll.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoik?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Emerald Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessica Banger?
Yes, and we are adjourned. Thank you all.